There we are. Just adjusting the computer there. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Adventure and Mystery Book Club. I am Bill Mallory, branch manager of the La Jolla Library, and welcome to Chapter 26 of Captain Blood by Rafeal Sabatini. Oh, goodness. We are, as I mentioned before in a previous episode, we are on the downward hill towards the end of the book. We still have a few chapters left, and so we've got chapter 26 starting off today, and this will be a good one. And just to recap briefly what we have read up to this point, our friend Captain Blood, Peter Blood, having been soundly rejected by Arabella Bishop, has saved the life of Lord Julian Wade, who he feels would be a better match for her, because who else but a lord and a highly placed English dignitary would be the perfect spouse for a lady like Arabella Bishop, and certainly not a pirate that he is now. He's come back to Tortuga, and this was, of course, they're all involved in the commission from King James. He is, of course, not happy at all that he had to take the commission from King James from Lord Julian in order to save his life and the lives of his men. And so he goes to Port Royal in Jamaica and has to deal with Lord Julian, with Colonel Bishop. Arabella Bishop, his niece, is hiding, basically staying away from him, won't talk to him, and ultimately he rejects the commission. More than half of his crew has already left in another ship to go to Tortuga and basically mutiny against him. Not a real mutiny. That's a little overly dramatic, because he Peter Blood tells them to go to Tortuga, and what he tells Colonel Bishop when Colonel Bishop asks about this, he says, "I'm telling my men to go notify the rest of the sailors that are in my fleet of ships and let them know that I've signed on this commission for King James." And Colonel Bishop, his eternal adversary, basically says, "You're not fooling anyone, buddy. We all know that they were escaping to avoid capture, because if they don't take the commission, then they will be arrested as pirates. So this was simply a scam in order to get them to safety, and so you can get away and go ahead and do your piratey badness." So, although Rafeal Sabatini said it much better than that. Although piratey badness, I don't know, that's a great line. I like that line. So he goes over and realizes that this is not going to work. This whole thing, he has lost the faith of his men. He has lost faith in himself. He has been soundly rejected by Arabella Bishop, the woman for whom he has a great affection from the time that they first met. And he takes Colonel Bishop hostage long enough for them to get on board the ship, sail the ship out of cannon range, and then set Colonel Bishop in a small boat so he can row himself back to Port Royal, Jamaica. So, because of now the plan was, here's the plan. Wolverstone was leading the group who wanted to not be part of the commission and not be part of Captain Blood's crew anymore, because they didn't trust this King of England. He did many of them wrong, and it was his plan to sail to Tortuga, Wolverstone, and thereby notify everybody what had happened, which would have branded Peter Blood a traitor, basically. But at this point, Captain Blood has now returned to his ship after hostaging Colonel Bishop, and he sails off for Tortuga as well. However, because of a freak tropical storm, Wolverstone gets delayed, and Captain Blood gets to Tortuga before him. And when he gets there, he doesn't tell anybody anything. He doesn't say what happened. He doesn't say anything that's going on. He immediately starts drinking himself to death. He's drinking heavily. He's gambling. He's not talking to people. People aren't sure what's going on. He's a big hero in Tortuga, so they want to find out what about your adventures? Where have you been for so long? And it's only after a few more days that Wolverstone in his ship arrives, and he can see the captain's ship already in the harbor. So he knows that the captain is already there. By the time he gets there, all of a sudden everyone's crowding around Wolverstone saying, "Hey, what happened? What happened? The captain won't tell us anything." And so he realizes, okay, if the captain hasn't told them what was going on, first of all, he's back. And so that's an indication that something strange is happening. Second of all, he didn't tell anyone what was going on. So Wolverstone, being a sharp fellow that he is, decides to say, he makes up a story. He makes up a story that says, "Oh yeah, they wanted to give him the king's commission, and he said he would. Then he lied to them to escape, and now here we are all here in Tortuga." And that was essentially the story. Basically, another rousing adventure and a series of rousing adventures where Captain Blood gets the better of the foe. However, Captain Blood, again, spends all of his time drinking. He stays alone in his captain's cabin on board the ship. And this goes on for a couple of months. The rainy season, basically, is what they say in the book. The entire rainy season, he stays in his cabin. He gets drunk. He goes out occasionally and gets food and starts gambling, and then drinks heavily again and goes back. Basically, as a kind of a broken man, basically, and that everything he has wanted, he's not been able to get. He has decided he's not going to be a pirate anymore. He doesn't know what he's going to be. One of the captains of one of his ships just decides that he's not going to wait around anymore. He wants to go do piratey things, and so weighs anchor, sails out of Tortuga off on his own adventure. So one captain is already down. They're getting a lot of complaints from a lot of the other crews for the other three ships, and then on one day they get a man by the name of Monsieur de Coucy comes and talks to the deputy governor of Tortuga, Monsieur de Ogeron, and Captain Blood is part of this as well. And he says, "You know that France and Spain are now at war." And Captain Blood is like, "Yeah, you call that news?" And Monsieur de Coucy says, "No, I mean, we're not talking about unofficial little skirmishes that happen out in the middle of nowhere, crimes of opportunity. We're talking about official, full-on war between France and Spain." And he says, Monsieur de Coucy is the representative of France, obviously, and so he says, "Would you sign up under King Louis and fight the Spanish officially for France?" Okay, he already signed up for, under the commission for King James because he had to save his men. Nobody liked it. Nobody thought it was a great idea, but it saved their lives, and so they did it. Now, since he's already fighting Spanish wherever he goes, and that's always been his goal, to fight the Spanish on the seas. So he goes and says, "Will you fight for King Louis? You can fight for France, and you would not be a pirate necessarily. You would be an official part of the French Navy, and you would be you could be fighting alongside Monsieur de Rivarol, who is a new character who's introduced now in this last chapter. And Monsieur de Rivarol is going to launch a huge attack, and your ships could be part of that attack, and you could really help us out. And several things happen all at once. First of all, Captain Blood doesn't care. One way or another, he's perfectly happy to go back to his cabin and drink himself to death. But the rest of the men, the rest of the crew of the three remaining ships want the action, they want the activity, they want to do something. They don't want to be stuck in Tortuga just hanging around. So Wolverstone thinks it's a good idea. All of his other captains think it's a good idea. So with that in mind, and since he cannot think of anything to say against it, they decide to go ahead and meet up with Monsieur de Rivarol's fleet of ships and be part of the attack. And that, my friends, is where we left it. So we pull out our copy of Captain Blood here. We'll start chapter 26. Hold on a second here. A little Earl Grey to wet the whistle. Chapter 26, which is entitled Monsieur de Rivarol. Captain Blood was still in that disgruntled mood when he sailed from Tortuga, and still in that mood when he came to his moorings in the bay of Petit Goave. In that same mood he greeted Monsieur le Baron de Rivarol, when this nobleman with his fleet of 5 men of war at last dropped anchor alongside the buccaneer ships in the middle of February. The Frenchman had been 6 weeks on the voyage, he announced, delayed by unfavorable weather. Summoned to wait on him, Captain Blood repaired to the castle of Petit Goave, where the interview was to take place. The Baron, a tall, hawk-faced man of 40, very cold and distant of manner, measured Captain Blood with an eye of obvious disapproval. Of Hagthorpe, Iberville, and Wolverstone, who stood ranged behind their captain, he took no heed whatever. Monsieur de Coucy offered Captain Blood a chair. A moment, Monsieur de Coucy. I do not think Monsieur le Baron has observed that I am not alone. Let me present to you, sir, my companions, Captain Hagthorpe of the Elizabeth, Captain Wolverstone of the Atropos, Captain Iberville of the Lachesis. The Baron stared hard and haughtily at Captain Blood, then, very distantly and barely perceptibly, inclined his head to each of the other 3. His manner implied plainly that he despised them, and that he desired them at once to understand it. It had a curious effect on Captain Blood. It awoke the devil in him, and it awoke at the same time his self-respect, which of late had been slumbering. A sudden shame of his disordered, ill-kempt appearance made him perhaps the more defiant. There was almost a significance in the way he hitched his sword-belt round, so that the wrought hilt of the very serviceable rapier was brought into fuller view. He waved his captains to the chairs that stood about. "Draw up to the table, lads. We are keeping the Baron waiting." They obeyed him. Wolverstone with a grin that was full of understanding. Haughtier grew the stare of Monsieur de Rivarol. To sit at table with these bandits placed him upon what he counted a dishonoring equality. It had been his notion that, with the possible exception of Captain Blood, they should take his instructions standing as became men of their quality in the presence of a man of his. He did the only thing remaining to mark a distinction between himself and them. He put on his hat. You're very wise now, said Blood amiably. I feel the draught myself, and he covered himself with his plumed castor. Monsieur de Rivarol changed color. He quivered visibly with anger, and was a moment controlling himself before venturing to speak. Monsieur de Coucy was obviously very ill at ease. Sir, said the Baron, frostily, you compel me to remind you that the rank you hold is that of Captain de Vasseur, and that you are in the presence of the General of the armies of France by sea and land in America. You compel me to remind you further that there is a deference due from your rank to mine. I am happy to assure you, said Captain Blood, that the reminder is unnecessary. I am, by way of accounting myself, a gentleman, little though I may look like one at present, and I should not account myself that were I capable of anything but deference to those whom nature or fortune may have placed above me, or to those who, being placed beneath me in rank, my labor under a disability to resent my lack of it. It was a neatly intangible rebuke. Monsieur de Rivarol bit his lip. Captain Blood swept on without giving him time to reply. Thus much being clear, shall we come to business? Monsieur de Rivarol's hard eyes considered him a moment. Perhaps it will be best, said he, and he took up a paper. I have here a copy of the articles into which you entered with Monsieur de Coucy. Before going further, I have to observe that Monsieur de Coucy has exceeded his instructions in admitting you to 1/5 of the prizes taken. His authority did not warrant his going beyond 1/10. That is a matter between yourself and Monsieur de Coucy, my general. Oh, no, it is a matter between myself and you. Your pardon, my general, the articles are signed. So far as we are concerned, the matter is closed. Also, out of regard for Monsieur de Coucy, we should not desire to be witnesses of the rebukes you may consider that he deserves. What I may have to say to Monsieur de Coucy is no concern of yours. That is what I'm telling you, my general. But, nom de Dieu, it is your concern, I suppose, that we cannot award you more than 1/10 share. Monsieur de Rivarol smote the table in exasperation. This pirate was too infernally skillful a fencer. You are quite certain of that, Monsieur le Baron, that you cannot? I am quite certain that I will not. Captain Blood shrugged, and looked down his nose. In that case, said he, it but remains for me to present my little account for our disbursement, and to fix the sum at which we should be compensated for our loss of time and derangement in me coming hither. That settled, we can part friends, Monsieur le Baron. No harm has been done. What the devil do you mean? The Baron was on his feet, leaning forward across the table. Is it possible that I am obscure? My French, perhaps, is not the purest, but... Oh, your French is fluent enough. Too fluent at moments, if I may permit myself the observation. Now, look you here, Monsieur le Filibuster. I am not a man with whom it is safe to play the fool, as you may very soon discover. You have accepted service of the King of France, you and your men. You hold the rank and draw the pay of a Captain de Vasseur, and your officers hold the rank of lieutenants. These ranks carry obligations which you would do well to study, the penalties for failing to discharge them which you might study at the same time. They are something severe. The first obligation of an officer is obedience. I commend it to your attention. You are not to conceive yourselves, as you appear to be doing, my allies in the enterprises I have in view, but my subordinates. In me you behold a commander to lead you, not a companion or an equal. You understand me, I hope. Oh, be sure that I understand. Captain Blood laughed. He was recovering his normal self amazingly under the inspiring stimulus of conflict. The only thing that marred his enjoyment was the reflection that he had not shaved. I forget nothing, I assure you, my general. I do not forget, for instance, as you appear to be doing, that the articles we signed are the condition of our service, and that the articles provide that we receive 1/5 share. Refuse us that, and you cancel the articles, and you cancel our services with them. From that moment we cease to have the honor to hold the rank of in the navies of the King of France. There was more than a murmur of approval from his three captains. Rivarol glared at them, checkmated. In effect, Monsieur de Coucy was beginning timidly. In effect, monsieur, this is your doing. The Baron flashed on him, glad to have someone upon whom he could fasten the sharp fangs of his irritation. You should be broke for it. You bring the king's service into disrepute. You force me, his majesty's representatives, into an impossible position. Is it impossible to award us the 1/5 share? Quoth Captain Blood silkily. In that case, there is no need for heat or injuries to Monsieur de Coucy. Monsieur de Coucy knows that we would not have come for less. We depart again upon your assurance that you cannot award us more. And things are as they would have been if Monsieur de Coucy had adhered rigidly to his instructions. I have proved, I hope, to your satisfaction, Monsieur le Baron, that if you repudiate the articles, you can neither claim our services nor hinder our departure, not in honor. Not in honor, sir. To the devil with your insolence. Do you imply that any course that were not in honor would be possible to me? I do not imply it because it would not be possible, said Captain Blood. We should see to that. It is, my general, for you to say whether the articles are repudiated. The Baron sat down. I will consider the matter, he said sullenly. You shall be advised of my resolve. Captain Blood rose, and his officers rose with him. Captain Blood bowed. Monsieur le Baron, said he. Then he and his buccaneers removed themselves from the august and irate presence of the general of the king's armies by land and sea in America. You conceive that there followed for Monsieur de Coucy an extremely bad quarter of an hour. Monsieur de Coucy, in fact, deserves your sympathy. His self-sufficiency was blown from him by the haughty Monsieur de Rivarol, as down from a thistle in the winds of autumn. The general of the king's armies abused him, this man who was governor of Hispaniola, as if he were a lackey. Monsieur de Coucy defended himself by urging the thing that Captain Blood had so admirably urged already on his behalf, that if the terms he had made with the buccaneers were not confirmed, there was no harm done. Monsieur de Rivarol bullied and browbeat him into silence. Having exhausted abuse, the Baron proceeded to indignities, since he accounted that Monsieur de Coucy had proved himself unworthy of the post he held. Monsieur de Rivarol took over the responsibilities of that post for as long as he might remain in Hispaniola, and to give effect to this he began by bringing soldiers from his ships and settling his own guard in Monsieur de Coucy's castle. Out of this, trouble followed quickly. Wolverstone, coming ashore the next morning in the picturesque garb that he affected, his head swathed in a colored handkerchief, he was jeered at by an officer of the newly landed French troops. Not accustomed to derision, Wolverstone replied in kind and with interest. The officer passed to insult, and Wolverstone struck him a blow that felled him and left him only half of his poor senses. Within the hour the matter was reported to Monsieur de Rivarol, and before noon, by Monsieur de Rivarol's orders, Wolverstone was under arrest in the castle. The Baron had just sat down to dinner with Monsieur de Coucy when the Negro who waited on them announced Captain Blood. Peevishly, Monsieur de Rivarol bade him be admitted, and there entered now into his presence a spruce and modish gentleman, dressed with care and sombre richness in black and silver, his swarthy, clear-cut, scrupulously shaven face was scrupulously shaven, his long black hair in ringlets that fell to a collar of fine point. In his right hand the gentleman carried a broad black hat with a scarlet ostrich plume. In his left hand an ebony cane. His stockings were of silk, a bunch of ribbons masked his garters, and the black rosettes of his shoes were finely edged with gold. For a moment Monsieur de Rivarol did not recognize him, for Blood looked younger by 10 years than yesterday. But the vivid blue eyes under their level black brows were not to be forgotten, and they proclaimed him for the man announced even before he had spoken. His resurrected pride had demanded that he should put himself on an equality with the Baron, and advertise that equality by his exterior. "I come inopportunely," he courteously excused himself. "My apologies. My business could not wait. It concerns Monsieur de Coucy, Captain Wolverstone of the Lachesis, whom you have placed under arrest." "It was I who placed him under arrest," said Monsieur de Rivarol. "Indeed, but I thought that Monsieur de Coucy was governor of Hispaniola." "Whilst I am here, monsieur, I am the supreme authority. It is well that you should understand it." "Oh, perfectly. But it is not possible that you are aware of the mistake that has been made." "Mistake, you say?" "I say mistake. On the whole, it is polite of me to use that word. Also, it is expedient. It will save discussions. Your people have arrested the wrong man, Monsieur de Rivarol. Instead of the French officer who used the grossest provocation, they have arrested Captain Wolverstone. It is a matter which I beg you to reverse without delay." Monsieur de Rivarol's hawk face flamed scarlet, his dark eyes bulged. "Sir, you are insolent, but of an insolence that is intolerable." Normally, a man of the utmost self-possession, he was so rudely shaken now that he actually stammered. "Monsieur le Baron, you waste words. This is the new world. It's not merely new, it is novel to one reared amid the superstitions of the old. That novelty you have not yet had time, perhaps, to realize. Therefore, I overlook the offensive epithet you have used. But justice is justice, and the new world as in the old, and injustice as intolerable here as there. Now, justice demands the enlargement of my officer and the arrest of punishment of yours. That justice I invite you with submission to administer." "With submission?" snorted the Baron in furious scorn. "With the utmost submission, monsieur, but at the same time I will remind Monsieur le Baron that my buccaneers number 800, your troops 500. And Monsieur de Coucy will inform you of the interesting fact that Any one buccaneer is equal in action to at least 3 soldiers of the line. I am perfectly frank with you, monsieur, to save time and hard words. Either Captain Wolverstone is instantly set at liberty, or we must take measures to set him at liberty ourselves. The consequences may be appalling. But it is as you please, Monsieur le Baron. You are the supreme authority. It is for you to say. Monsieur de Rivarol was white to his lips. In all his life he had never been so bearded and defied, but he controlled himself. You will do me the favor to wait in the anteroom, Monsieur le Capitaine. I desire a word with Monsieur de Coucy. You shall presently be informed of my decision. When the door had closed, the Baron loosed his fury upon the head of Monsieur de Coucy. So these are the men you have enlisted in the king's service, the men who are to serve under me, the men who do not serve but dictate, and this before the enterprise that has brought me from France is even under way. What explanations do you offer me, Monsieur de Coucy? I warn you that I am not pleased with you. I am, in fact, as you may perceive, exceedingly angry. The governor seemed to shed his chubbiness. He drew himself stiffly erect. Your rank, monsieur, does not give you the right to rebuke me, nor do the facts. I have enlisted for you the men that you desired me to enlist. It is not my fault if you do not know how to handle them better. As Captain Blood has told you, this is the new world. So. Monsieur de Rivarol smiled malignantly. Not only do you offer no explanation, but you venture to put me in the wrong. Almost I admire your temerity. But there. He waved the matter aside. He was supremely sardonic. It is, you tell me, the new world, and new worlds, new manners, I suppose. In time, I may conform my ideas to this new world, or I may conform this new world to my ideas. He was menacing on that. For the moment, I must accept what I find. It remains for you, monsieur, who have experience of these savage byways, to advise me out of that experience how to act. Monsieur le Baron, it was a folly to have arrested the buccaneer captain. It would be madness to persist. We have not the forces to meet force. In that case, monsieur, perhaps you will tell me what we are to do with regard to the future. Am I to submit at every turn to the dictates of this man Blood? Is the enterprise upon which we are embarked to be conducted as he decrees? Am I, in short, the king's representative in America, to be at the mercy of these rascals? Oh, by no means. I am enrolling volunteers here in Hispaniola. I am raising a corps of Negroes. I compute that when this is done, we shall have force of 1,000 men, the buccaneers apart. But in that case, why not dispense with them? Because they will always remain the sharp edge of any weapon that we forge. In the class of warfare that lies before us, they are so skilled that what Captain Blood has just said is not an overstatement. A buccaneer is equal to 3 soldiers of the line. At the same time, we shall have a sufficient force to keep them in control. For the rest, monsieur, they have certain notions of honor. They will stand by their articles, and so we deal justly with them. They will deal justly with us and give no trouble. I have experience of them, and I pledge you my word for that. Monsieur de Rivarol condescended to be mollified. It was necessary that he should save his face, and in a degree the governor afforded him the means to do so, as well as a certain guarantee for the future in the further force he was raising. Very well, said he. Be so good as to recall this Captain Blood. The captain came in, assured and very dignified. Monsieur de Rivarol found him detestable, but dissembled it. Monsieur le Capitaine, I have taken counsel with Monsieur le Gouverneur. From what he tells me, it is possible that a mistake has been committed. Justice, you may be sure, shall be done. To assure it, I shall myself preside over a council to be composed of 2 of my senior officers, yourself and an officer of yours. This council shall hold at once an impartial investigation to the affair, and the offender, the man guilty of having given provocation, shall be punished. Captain Blood bowed. It was not his wish to be extreme. Perfectly, Monsieur le Baron. And now, sir, you have had the night for reflection in this matter of the articles. Am I to understand that you confirm or that you repudiate them? Monsieur de Rivarol's eyes narrowed. His mind was full of what Monsieur de Coucy had said, that these buccaneers must prove the sharp edge of any weapon he might forge. He could not dispense with them. He perceived that he had blundered tactically in attempting to reduce the agreed share. Withdrawal from a position of that kind is ever fraught with loss of dignity, but there were those volunteers that Monsieur de Coucy was enrolling to strengthen the hand of the king's general. Their presence might admit anon of the reopening of this question. Meanwhile, he must retire in the best order possible. I have considered that too, he announced, and whilst my opinion remains unaltered, I must confess that since Monsieur de Coucy has pledged us, it is for us to fulfill the pledges. The articles are confirmed, sir. Captain Blood bowed again, in vain. Monsieur de Rivarol looked searchingly for the least trace of a smile of triumph on those firm lips. The buccaneer's face remained of the utmost gravity. Wolverstone was set at liberty that afternoon, and his assailant sentenced to 2 months' detention. Thus harmony was restored. But it had been an unpromising beginning, and there was more to follow shortly of a similar discordant kind. Blood and his officers were summoned a week later to a council which sat to determine their operations against Spain. Monsieur de Rivarol laid before them a project for a raid upon the wealthy Spanish town of Cartagena. Captain Blood professed astonishment. Sourly invited by Monsieur de Rivarol to state his grounds for it, he did so with the utmost frankness. Were I general of the king's armies in America, said he, I should have no doubt or hesitation as to the best way in which to serve my royal master of the French nation. And that which I think will be obvious to Monsieur de Coucy is that we should at once invade Spanish Hispaniola and reduce the whole of this fruitful and splendid island into the possession of the King of France. That may follow, said Monsieur de Rivarol. It is my wish that we begin with Cartagena. You mean, sir, that we are to sail across the Caribbean on an adventurous expedition, neglecting that which lies here at our very door. In our absence, a Spanish invasion of French Hispaniola is possible. If we begin by reducing the Spaniards here, that possibility will be removed. We shall have added to the crown of France the most coveted possession in the West Indies. The enterprise offers no particular difficulty. It may be speedily accomplished, and once accomplished, it would be time to look further afield. That would seem the logical order in which the campaign should proceed. He ceased, and there was silence. Monsieur de Rivarol sat back in his chair, the feathered end of a quill between his teeth. Presently he cleared his throat and asked a question. Is there anybody else who shares Captain Blood's opinion? None answered him. His own officers were overawed by him. Blood's followers naturally preferred Cartagena because offering the greater chance of loot. Loyalty to their leader kept them silent. You seem to be alone in your opinion, said the Baron, with his vinegary smile. Captain Blood laughed outright. He had suddenly read the Baron's mind. His airs and graces and haughtiness had so imposed upon Blood that it was only now that at last he saw through them into the fellow's peddling spirit. Therefore he laughed. There was really nothing else to do, but his laughter was charged with more anger even than contempt. He had been deluding himself that he had done with piracy. The conviction that this French service was free of any taint of that was the only consideration that had induced him to accept it. Yet here was this haughty, supercilious gentleman who dubbed himself general of the armies of France, proposing a plundering, thieving raid when, stripped of its mean, transparent mask of legitimate warfare, was revealed as piracy of the most flagrant. Monsieur de Rivarol, intrigued by his mirth, scowled upon him disapprovingly. Why do you laugh, monsieur? Because I discover here an irony that is supremely droll. You, Monsieur le Baron General of the King's armies by land and sea in America, propose an enterprise of a purely buccaneering character, whilst I, the buccaneer, am urging one that is more concerned with upholding the honor of France. You perceive how droll it is. Monsieur de Rivarol perceived nothing of the kind. Monsieur de Rivarol, in fact, was extremely angry. He bounded to his feet, and every man in the room rose with him, save only Monsieur de Coucy, who sat on with a grim smile on his lips. He, too, now read the Baron like an open book, and reading him, despised him. Monsieur the filibuster, cried Rivarol in his thick voice, it seems that I must again remind you that I am your superior officer. My superior officer, you, lord of the world! Why, you are just a common pirate. But you shall hear the truth for once, and that before all these gentlemen who have the honor to serve the King of France. It is for me, a buccaneer, a sea robber, to stand here to tell you what is in the interest of French honor and the French crown, whilst you, the French king's appointed general, neglecting this, are for spending the king's resources against an outlying settlement of no account. Shedding French blood in seizing a place that cannot be held only because it has been reported to you that there is much gold in Cartagena, and that the plunder of it will enrich you. It is worthy of a huckster who sought to haggle with us about our share and to beat us down after the articles pledging you were already signed. If I am wrong, let Monsieur de Coucy say so. If I am wrong, let me be proven wrong, and I will beg your pardon. Meanwhile, monsieur, I withdraw from this council. I will have no further part in your deliberations. I accept the service of the King of France with intent to honor that service. I cannot honor that service by lending countenance to a waste of life and resources in raids upon unimportant settlements, with plunder for their only object. The responsibility for such decisions must rest with you, and with you alone. I desire Monsieur de Coucy to report me to the ministers of France. For the rest, monsieur, it merely remains for you to give me your orders. I await them aboard my ship, and anything else of a personal nature that you may feel I have provoked by the terms I have felt compelled to use in this council. Monsieur le Baron, I have the honor to wish you good day. He stalked out, and his three captains, although they thought him mad, rolled after him in loyal silence. Monsieur de Rivarol was gasping like a landed fish. The stark truth had robbed him of speech. When he recovered, it was to thank heaven vigorously that the council was relieved by Captain Blood's own act of that gentleman's further participation in its deliberations. Inwardly, Monsieur de Rivarol burned with shame and rage. The mask had been plucked from him, and he had been held up to scorn. He, the general of the king's armies by sea and land in America. Nevertheless, it was to Cartagena that they sailed in the middle of March. Volunteers and Negroes had brought up the forces directly under Monsieur de Rivarol to 1,200 men. With these, he thought he could keep the buccaneer contingent in order and submissive. They made up an imposing fleet, led by Monsieur de Rivarol's flagship, the Victorieuse, a mighty vessel of 80 guns. Each of the 4 other French ships was at least as powerful as Blood's Arabella, which was of 40 guns, followed by the lesser buccaneer vessels, the Elizabeth, Lachesis, and Atropos, and a dozen frigates laden with stores besides canoes and small craft in tow. Narrowly they missed the Jamaica fleet with Colonel Bishop, which sailed north for Tortuga 2 days after the Baron de Rivarol's southward passage. And there we go, my friends. That is chapter 26 of Captain Blood, entered into an agreement that is apparently not working for either side. However, they have yet to actually fight the battle. So we'll see what happens, and hopefully you can join me in 2 days on Wednesday at 4 p.m. as we read another chapter of Captain Blood by Rafeal Sabatini. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully we'll see you again. Bye, everyone.